Hello, everybody. Good morning and happy 4th of July. This is Colton. This is the Mile 17 podcast, and I am releasing this episode. It will be the 4th of July. So I hope that you're all having a safe and wonderful holiday. And if you're listening outside of America, well, I hope that you have an amazing, what is it, Thursday, 4th of July. But for anybody that's here listening in America, happy 4th, stay safe, and don't be putting off too many fireworks and end up in the emergency department with your fingers blown off because it happens every single year. So, in today's episode, I have some stories I wanted to share with you. They're a little bit personal and it might be a little bit triggering for some people. So I just wanted to kind of preface with that. I am going to talk about death and things that I have seen in the hospital and give my perspective on how certain things that I've dealt with as a nurse in the emergency department has affected me and changed my perspective on life and the way that I live. And it just offers a really interesting perspective when you see these things that most people would never witness in their life that nurses and healthcare professionals that are working in the hospital, specifically in the emergency department, from my perspective, people will never see this, and we see this day in and day out. And so I've just picked some scenarios that have really stuck with me through the years and things that I have picked up and learned from experiencing these things. And this is specifically just about death because I've talked about this before. I'm like obsessed with the concept of death because I think as a society we've really made death taboo and scary and nobody wants to talk about it, but it's something that's going to happen to all of us at some point and we have no idea how it's going to happen. And there's that show, like, what is, like, Million Ways to Die, and it's true. Like, there's so many ways to die. We have no idea what's in store for us, and so many of us live our lives with the idea that we're all going to make it to 100 and live happily ever after. And unfortunately, it's just not the case. I mean, you can do things in your life to give you the best odds to live healthy and to live a long life that offers you prosperity and that you live healthily and feel good for as long as you can in your life. But there are just things that are out of our control. There's car accidents. You could hop in a plane, something could happen there. You could walk out on the street and get run over. You could wake up tomorrow and be diagnosed with something that's terminal. You could have some crazy rare medical diagnosis. You could be at the wrong place at the wrong time. And we have a lot of things especially in America, with like mass shootings, or you could be walking down the wrong street at the wrong time and be robbed and be stabbed. Like, there's just so many ways. And I'm not trying to scare you because that's not a way to live life either. So be scared and afraid that you're going to die. It's just to be realistic and to understand that we are going to die. And so if we can just live our lives each day so grateful, like, you could go to sleep and just not wake up for whatever reason. And so when you wake up in the morning, just start there. Be like, I'm awake, I'm here. And that is enough for me to feel the fire, to build and create this life and live this life that I want to live just because I'm here. That's all I need. All I need is the evidence that I'm alive today. I was standing, you might think I'm crazy, but I was standing in my bathroom last night, gotten out of the shower. It was a very odd moment. For whatever reason, I just like caught my eye in the mirror, and it like stopped me in my tracks because for like it was like a weird, like almost like out of body experience to where I was like, I am here. Like, this is me. I am here. I'm like looking at myself in the eyes and I'm like, that's me. Like, there's a soul inside of there. I can see the physical body, but when I'm looking into my eyes, it's like I was like seeing through into my soul. And it sounds very weird and sounds very, I don't even know how to explain it. But I sat there, I'm not even kidding. I sat there for like 10 minutes and I just like talked to myself. And it was I felt so calm after. It was like so therapeutic. I was just talking to myself, telling myself, talking myself up, and just feeling good about life and who I am, and just like the fact that I get to wake up and live here. And I think a lot of us, get caught up in how much money are we going to make? How many kids do we want to have? Where do we want to live? What house are we going to buy? Like, who are we going to marry? And like, we get so caught up in all these like things and like trying to like chase the next achievement and like get that promotion at work and make sure we look good on the outside and have a good social media following. And there's just so much shit that we're all trying to do that we forget to just like stand where we are as the people that we are and just be thankful and grateful to live. We are living on earth. Like it is a literal miracle that you and I, us together, are here living and even having this conversation. It is a miracle. So if you can harness that and understand that, and it's a daily reminder, every day you have to wake up and remind yourself of this because you'll forget. And sometimes we get off course and we forget this for periods of time. Then all of a sudden it's just like one day where I'm like, oh yeah, oh my God, my life's a miracle. Me being alive, having a chance at life every day is a fucking miracle. And you have to remember that. So, one of my very first jobs as a nurse, I worked on an oncology unit. And this was technically my second job, but it was one of my first jobs. And on that oncology unit, a lot of these patients that we had were very sick because if people are being admitted and having to stay in the hospital to get chemotherapy or they're having some complications from their cancer, odds are they are probably pretty sick. And on top of that, we also, since we were that type of unit, like the nurses were just very compassionate. They were a good group of nurses. We were kind of the unit that we would take these comfort care patients. And what I mean by comfort care at that hospital, it just meant that these were patients that were likely going to die in 1 to 2 days. And so we were keeping them as comfortable as possible until they died. And so, especially being a young nurse, that really offered me so much perspective on life because sometimes these people would have so much family in and out, constantly checking on them, holding their hands during the process. And even though the patient's not consciously looking at them and consciously aware, I always was like, they know, they feel that. And I just felt like that was so important that they had that love and support. The ones that honestly hurt me and stuck with me were the ones that would lie there alone and nobody to check on them. No family really called to care, maybe one or two phone calls, but nobody was physically there with them. And it was up to us, the staff, to kind of check in. Like I worked with some nurses and I'd done it myself that would go in and just kind of hold the patient's hand, turn on some kind of music that's calming, and just like be with that human being who is dying. And, you can look at that situation in a couple ways. Like, okay, maybe they don't have anybody there for a reason. Maybe they did some things that were really messed up and they burned a lot of bridges and there was nobody there with them. But as the nurse in that situation, that's not for us to determine. It's our job to just be there with the patient and to provide a comforting environment as they're transitioning into whatever that next phase is for them as far as dying and where they're going to be going next spiritually. I don't know what you believe. Everybody has kind of different beliefs on that. Either way, it was just kind of our job to like be there with them. And this was especially prevalent during COVID because family wasn't allowed in the hospital for a long time. And I've talked to even some of my friends, that have worked in other units like in the ICUs and just like the impact that had to like go in there and just like sit with these people who were dying and to just have that, give them that dignity that they are a human being. And regardless of the choices that they've made throughout their life, like they're a human, they're on their way out of this physical world. And it just taught me so much and just gave me such perspective and just to realize that like all these material things really don't matter, like because when you're there at that moment in your life and you're passing on, all of the things that you thought mattered in life, like it disappears because it never really mattered. The most important things are your relationships that you have with people, your partner, your family, your friends, the love that you give, the kindness that you put out into the world, the kind of person that you are on the inside and what you give on the outside. Like that's what matters. Like we're all here to like be connected and to have these experiences with one another, not to accumulate all these things and like, buy the nice car, get the fancy boat, make sure you have a house and go on these extravagant vacations. Like, yes, these are all nice and like we all like these things. And I'm not saying that not to go strive for those because it does make life fun. We like those things. What I'm saying is like that's not what actually matters in the end. And I think a lot of us are so focused on like, oh my God, I got to accumulate all this wealth. I got to do all these things. I got to make sure I have $1 million in the bank account. And just like you get all this noise and like you're constantly just like striving and achieving. And it's like, I got to get that next degree and I got to prove to these people that like I am worthy by achieving all these amazing and great fantastic things, and it's like no, it just doesn't matter. Like the type of person that you are is what matters, and the life that you lead is what matters, because if you're happy and you're living a life that fulfills you, then when you're at the end and you're transitioning into whatever you believe is on the next side after you die, like then that's you've had a fulfilled life. You've done your job in this physical world to take care of yourself and to make sure that you're getting the most out of what you can from just being here on earth. Another one, the second one that I'm going to share that really sticks out to me is, and I'm only sharing this one because it was the first time I had ever physically given chest compressions, and so I think those things just stick with you. It's like losing your virginity when you never forget those things. Because it's just like this like wow, like this moment you're like, "Oh my god." And so I remember the first time I ever had to give chest compressions, I had this patient and she was having a really hard time breathing. She was only in her like 60s. Hard time breathing, like she's like super restless. And at the time, as a younger nurse, I was like actually kind of annoyed with her because I'm like, can you stop moving? Like, just like chill. You need to just try to breathe. Well, so naive of me because she was having a hard time breathing for a reason. And we were working her up. We were doing all the tests. We had a ton of oxygen on her. We were about to take her to get a CAT scan because she didn't look too well. And but I need to in order to get that CAT scan, it's like, well, you gotta sit still. And I just remember, and I think this is why I'll never forget this, is because I could just see in her eyes that she was scared. And she ended up going unconscious. And I remember I wasn't even in the room. I'd seen on the monitor things were changing. So I ran in the room. I go in there and she's unconscious. And so I called for help and started again. I was a very, very young and new nurse, and somebody came in and they're like, you should probably start doing some chest compressions. And so so I did. And the whole process started to unravel with all the medical professionals. We did everything that we possibly could, and we could not get her back. She ended up dying. And what I learned from this is just how fast things can go. And she was here 1 second and like the next, like she was gone. And again, you don't always know what's going on with somebody, like especially when they're coming into the emergency department. There is like so many things. And like, yes, there are professionals there that are doing the best that they can to diagnose and get things quick to get treatment. But you you know, based on sometimes people just come in and their vital signs might look okay, even though they don't look okay. So we're running their labs, we're trying to get imaging and doing the best that we can. But sometimes the best that we can do is still not enough to save somebody. And that's something that I've really, really, really had to learn and to grapple with is sometimes our best is not enough because for whatever reason, for whatever is going on, that person just cannot compensate anymore. They cannot keep up with the demands that their body needs. And yes, we could argue one way or another that maybe this patient should have gone down a different route and maybe we should have put a breathing tube in earlier. And just like, yes, there's so many things you can like backpedal on and be like, well, you should have done this. But in that moment, that's what had happened. So and I'm just sharing that scenario because again, it was my first time ever doing CPR. And I think it was like my first time. It's a very weird concept when somebody comes in and you're talking to them and they're alive and you're looking them in the eyes and you're having this like communication with them, and then like they're dead a few moments later. It's different like when somebody comes in from an ambulance who is already unconscious that like the EMS workers are doing compressions on, and then it transfers into the hospital because we just take over from there and then on we go. But when somebody comes in and they're conscious and they're talking and you're seeing the life in them, and then the next moment they're gone because something happened, it's a very odd concept because you're like, well, I kind of built a little bit, of a quote unquote relationship with them during this. And they were just here. I was just talking to them and now they're dead. And now I'm zipping them up into a body bag and shipping them off to the morgue and on to the next patient. And it's like people wonder why healthcare workers and nurses specifically, deal with so many mental health issues. It's because that's what we're dealing with. That's trauma. You're dealing with this traumatic event, and then you're expected to just like move on to the next thing because you're working and you have other patients, and you have to compartmentalize these things. And sometimes you shift it over in your brain, and then you never deal with it. It never comes to the surface. You move on with your life, and you don't realize that it's subconsciously affecting you, and you're just going on about your life. And then certain things will start to happen, and it triggers you, and you don't understand what's happening. And it's because that trauma is stuck in your body unprocessed, and it's from dealing with those types of things. It's not normal to pound on somebody's chest to bring them back to life. It is not normal to see blood flying everywhere, limbs falling off. Like, these things are not normal. And working in this kind of environment and field, like, it's just part of the job. And I think what I'm trying to say is, like, these things have to be processed through, because if you're not processing them, then that stuff lives in your body, and you're not getting through it, and they start to become open wounds inside your own body. The third situation, I kind of was actually just touching on this before, is the traumatic events. So specifically, this happened, a car accident came in, and the patient's arm was severed. It was barely hanging on. And I remember this specific instance. Also, again, I think it's the ones that I'm doing chest compressions, because you're not supposed to look at these people, because if you see them, it's like you're like seeing them, and it's like almost making it too personal. But I had nowhere else to look, because if I looked straight down, I am not joking, the amount of just like blood everywhere, limb was coming off, arm was barely hanging on. Doctors were doing so much, like we were trying so hard to get this patient back. And we were doing everything. But the specific situation sticks with me, because this was a parent in a car accident, was just driving their kids, and for whatever reason, I don't know what the cause was of the accident, crashed the car. And 1 second, again, you're here, you're driving with your kids, and the next minute you're gone. And that it's that fast. Like, your whole life, you're not your whole life, the people in your life, the close ones to you, your spouse, your kids, your parents, your siblings, your friends, your community, their lives are forever changed, because now you're gone. And maybe this has happened to you. Maybe you can relate to this. Maybe you've lost somebody very close to you, and it turns your world upside down. And it's like, if these things happen in an instant, there's no closure, there's no time to process. And especially if this is like a spouse or a kid, or something along those lines, like, you're suddenly adjusting to this new life within seconds. And that's heavy, and it takes a lot of effort, and a lot of therapy and processing, and ways to just like get through this to move on with your life. And what I've learned from these situations specifically is that life does have to go on for these people. And it hurts my heart so much when these traumatic events happen, because again, the spouse of this person had to see them that way, and that's like the memory they're left with. And now they're stuck with processing this for themselves and helping their kids process this, and then becomes a forever job, because it's death is so different for each person to process. And I think that we really take for granted how precious life is when we have all of our people with us. And if you've been lucky enough to never have lost somebody that close to you, or somebody that that's been young, and you've never lost like a partner or a parent or anything along those lines, and you're not really sure how that even goes, be thankful and consider yourself lucky. And honestly, and if you have dealt with these things, I just hope that you have found ways to move on, and to also honor that person at the same time. And I know it's not easy, and it takes so much, like I said, therapy, and everybody gets through those things differently. But I think I really have these moments of just like reflection, when you're going through these situations. It's high adrenaline in the emergency department. We're trying everything we can, and then at the moment that the doctor calls time of death, it's just like a silence. And a lot of times we'll have a little moment of silence just to pay respects to the human being that just lost their life. But when you're backing somebody up cleaning them up and putting tags on their body and then taking them down to the morgue. It's really just a moment of just like pure reflection. And at least for me, I can't speak for everybody in the field and how everybody else feels, but for me, like I'm always in just awe. Like I remember just like going down to the morgue and it's just like there's just like body bags. And it's like these are all humans that are just like gone. And all of us are so worried about the clothes we're wearing and the way we look and again like the fancy dancy things that we forget to just stop and realize like that we're living life like we're forgetting to live life, we're forgetting to enjoy these special moments and these small moments which really are the big moments with the people that we love and making the memories and being present, getting off the goddamn phones like. And I'm so guilty of this. I'm not saying this is not me preaching at you. Like this is also me just like reflecting, like of just like getting off the phones and getting off the, stop scrolling and to be present and to know that each moment that you have is so precious and how fast these things can change. And if there's one thing that you can get from listening to this episode today, it's just understanding how fast life can go. And I think that we all know this, but like, do we actually sit and recognize it and give it the respect that it deserves of how fast this can all be taken from us? And even if, things can even happen to where maybe you don't die, but you get a debilitating injury and like your life is forever changed. And so just to wake up every day that you have, that you have the opportunity to live your life the way you want to live it, like be grateful for that and be thankful and recognize it because you never ever know when your last day is going to be here. And again, I'm not trying to scare you. This is not any kind of fear mongering. Like it's just truth. And like I think it's something that I can talk about just because I see it so often that it doesn't necessarily scare me. It just makes me aware. And yes, I get it as well. When you're working in an environment like this, like I'm hyper aware that these things can happen. So I think maybe like meeting in the middle of not being like hyper aware and not being naive and ignoring it, but like being in the middle and being like, I'm aware this can happen. I'm not going to sit here and stress and fret about the fact that I might die anytime because, you know, hopefully you live a long, healthy life until you're 105, but just recognize it and just be aware of it. This one really hurts. The, you know, anybody that dies is a tough situation to deal with. It's never easy. But the young ones are the ones that I think hit close, like really hit in the heart for most people. Especially, when I was working in Arizona, we would deal with a lot of drownings, and I didn't really work on the pediatric side of that emergency department, so I didn't really deal with it. But I know it happened often. I have one situation that I remember so vividly with a patient who was 18 years old and came in, had a twin, and I don't even know what had happened. Some kind of respiratory cardiac arrest suddenly. And we tried everything. We tried for so long. But what I remember most about this situation is the twin and the mom and just them being absolutely distraught and the mom just throwing herself on the body of her child who she had just lost, and that grief that she must have felt and that pain and how her life was forever changed in that moment. And I personally have known people throughout my life who have lost kids, and it changes people. Recovering from that, like I don't even know how to speak to that because I have no idea. I'm not a parent. I can't even imagine what that must feel like to lose a child. And just know if you're out there and you're listening and this is something that you've gone through, I'm sending you so much love, and I really hope that you've been able to find light in life and process through what you've needed to and gotten the right help that you've needed to. And I think in these situations that time really is like the only thing that starts to get people through these really hard emotions. And what I know about grief is you might think you're doing okay for a while, and then one day it just like slaps you in the face and it's like you're back to square one, and or like something happens or something reminds you of this person, and all of a sudden you're back to just like feeling that intense pain and grief. And just know that I see you and I feel you, and nobody ever needs to validate how you feel or what you've been through because that's your journey. And I just hope that you've found some kind of peace in life. And I hope that when you see things that remind you of your loved one that you've lost, that at some point in your life, you can just feel the happiness and joy and just know that they're with you. And I hope that provides any kind of comfort for you because there's just no words to provide to somebody who's going through that kind of grief or has gone through that kind of grief. It is gut wrenching and it will stop you in your tracks. And so back to this scenario with this 18-year-old, the lesson that I learned from this is that death can happen anytime, anywhere, at any age, and death just does not discriminate against your age, against your health. Dying young, I think, hurts so deeply because it's like this is that whole life ahead of them. And not this is not to say that the 95-year-old who passes away is not sad. It's still a life. Like it's still very sad, still requires grieving. But they've had a life that they've been able to at least live. But when these people die young, it's so heartbreaking because they didn't get the opportunity that we're all getting listening to this to just like keep waking up and keep living our lives and keep going after what we want to. And I think that's why so many of us take that for granted is we just think, like I said, that we're going to just have this 100-year life. And so we don't think about the fact that, we're going to this job that we can't stand and that we're surrounding ourselves with people who we may not want to wait. So we're wasting this time doing these things that we like don't even like to fucking do. And when you sit and think about it and you realize the mortality in our lives, it's like, why am I going to work doing this job that I fucking hate for 40, 50 years so that I can now retire? And I just look back on my life and I'm like, wow, I just spent all this time just like worrying because I needed all this money and I needed to make sure I had a retirement because everybody says that you need to make sure you have this huge retirement so that you can enjoy, this phase of your life. And for me, I'm like, okay, well, what about the rest of the life? Like, I'm just supposed to work and just like throw all this money into this whatever account, even though I hate what I'm doing, just so that I am secure and safe. And it's like, where's the balance in that? Like, why are people so okay with going to this corporate job that they can't stand and not chasing after these dreams from a young age because they're afraid? And it's because that's what society has done to us. Society has made us believe that we have to follow the social norm and we have to follow the plan that they've cut out for us in order to live a successful quote unquote life. I don't buy it. It's not true. You have to start living the life that you want to live today because nobody's going to do it for you. And if you're going to continue to just do these things that you don't even want to do because it's safe and secure for you, then you're not living a life that's true to yourself. And it's a dishonor to the life that you've been given. And only you can change that, especially if you have access to even listening to this conversation and you are on YouTube or you're on Spotify or you're on Apple. You are already given so much opportunity. You have so much opportunity. You have a device in your hand. You have access to so many things in this world. Why are you boxing yourself in to this little life that society has told you you have to live? Why? Ask yourself that. You don't have to. Now, if you like it and you're okay with that, you love that corporate job and you love that you're building retirement and you have all these plans and it feels right to you and you don't want for anything else, fine. That's amazing. Love it. Keep going for that. But if there's something inside of you that's burning up and you're like, I hate this life that I'm living, I don't want to keep doing this, I can't imagine doing this for the next 20, 30, 40 years, change it. Okay. And realize that the job that you're in is not permanent. The situation that you're in is not permanent. You have the power to choose and change and alter your reality because you create this reality. And if you make a couple different choices and you start bettering your health or you start working on going to a different career field or you start exploring options on how to start that creative project like a podcast or a book or whatever it may be, and you want to work on movies or something, like you have to start understanding that you have to build and create that life and that nobody's going to do it for you. And when you get to the end of your life, if you've just done all these things that society told you to do, you are living a life that is not fulfilled to you. I went off on a little tangent there, but it's because I'm very passionate about it. And I think a lot of us get stuck in these hamster wheels because we're afraid. And I'm guilty of this too. I get so afraid of what people are going to think about me if I go off of the path that I have thought I was going to go down. The last scenario that I'm going to talk about with a patient's death that's really impacted me and made me change my perspective on life. I've talked about this before. I've shared this story with you maybe a couple times, but for anybody that maybe is new to this show, I just want to offer you a trigger warning. This is something that's very serious with mental health. And if you're going through something and you're really struggling and you think this might trigger you, I would really recommend just turning it off at this point and maybe just like coming back at a different time when you're feeling a little bit better. Okay. But this last patient that I'm going to talk about was in the first 6 months of my career, and it really, really shook me up for a while. And it was a patient that I had who ultimately took his own life during my shift. And he did that by going outside and jumping off the parking garage. So it was a very traumatic thing to see. I didn't witness him jump, but I was there down there when they were working on him to try to get him back. And again, in my first 6 months of being a nurse, I was like, I have no idea how this is going to play out. I don't know what's going to happen. The hospital immediately brought us into this like debriefing to be like, make sure the media is not covering this. Like, let's figure out what happened. Like, I was like, I don't even know how to process this. Anyways, none of that really even matters. This is more about the patient and the impact that it had on me was just to know that like you never know what people are going through. And although somebody may look okay on the outside, it's some not everybody feels good on the inside. And I think a lot of us, especially men, are notorious for playing it like they're okay on the outside because they don't want to look weak and they don't want to be judged or made fun of because they're having these big feelings. And it is so vitally important to just check on people, especially the ones that you think are always okay. Just check on them because you never know the battles that somebody is dealing with on the inside. And a lot of people, especially men, do not share these struggles in fear of what people will think about them if they are vulnerable and share their emotions. And again, this is a thing that society has placed on men. And I think this comes out in a lot of ways with men as far as like anger and aggression and just acting not appropriately. And I'm not giving that an excuse. And that's not okay because it is ultimately their job to process these things and to share those emotions and be vulnerable and to seek help, just as it would be with any woman. It is our job. I'm just saying, as a society, we have made this a lot more difficult for people to do because of the way we look at men. So, what this patient taught me is to understand that mental health is real and people are battling things internally every day, and to live with more compassion for people because you really don't know what they're going through. And it's the same for you. People don't know what you're dealing with, and it can hurt when you just feel like nobody sees you, nobody understands you, and maybe nobody's taking you seriously, or everybody thinks, that you're like doing great because you're like this comedian and always making people laugh when on the inside you're like slowly dying because you feel terrible and you're depressed and you don't want to share that with anybody. And all I can offer up with this is to seek help and find anybody that you trust. If it's one friend, one family member, a therapist, a coworker, just somebody that you trust that you can go to and be like, I need some help. Like what can we do here? And I think that's our first step is just being able to share our emotions and to understand that we're all here on like a human experience together. And it's this shit's not easy, man. Like this is hard for all of us and we're all going through some kind of battle. And so if you can find your community and find your people and just like stay together and lean on each other in times of need, I think that's so very important. And yeah, so I'll leave you with that. I don't want to go like too far into detail about that situation, but I will leave you with that. And I hope that this conversation offered you something to think about. And again, this was not to scare you. I hope that you're not like freaking out that you might die. This was just to offer you perspective and to give you a understanding that like it's okay to look at your own life as a mortal and to realize that it's going to end one day, because I think that actually gives you power, and it gives you control over like your life to realize like, okay, if this is going to end one day in my physical form at least, how do I want to live this now and today? Why do I want to waste another day doing something that I can't stand and around people that I don't like in a city I don't like whatever that looks like for you? Or how can I do things tomorrow that are going to make this life a little bit better for me? Like, what can I add to my life tomorrow that might make me feel a little bit better and give me more purpose and make me more excited to wake up every day and to live my life? So I'll leave you with that. I am so thankful that you're all here. Thank you for coming to the Mile 17 podcast. I'm going to keep giving you guys some great content. I will have guests back on again. I know it's been a while since I've had guests, but people will start to come back on the podcast, and we're going to keep working at this and unpacking things of life, because that's what we're here for, is to understand this life and what we're all doing here and to share our experiences and our vulnerabilities and the things that we've been through to connect with one another. And that's what the whole purpose of this podcast is to connect through these shared experiences and to make you understand that you're not alone, and to remind you that all the time we all have these mile 17 moments. And if you're new to the podcast, the mile 17 moment is the point in the Boston Marathon where I had just seen my family, my husband. I did not think I could finish the race. I still had, what was it, like 9 miles left to go. I was exhausted and I just had to dig deep. I had to find that next level and I had to just like keep going and put one foot in front of the other, prove to myself that I could do the damn thing. And I did. And so mile 17 really just like stuck with me. And I used that as a metaphor for this platform in our lives, that sometimes you have to find that next level. You have to get gritty and prove to yourself that you can get through these things that maybe you thought you'd never be able to. So I'll leave you with that. Again, happy 4th of July. Stay safe out there. And thank you all for being here. I love you all so much. And I'll catch you next time. Bye.